Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Tuesday, September 22nd. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. Today is the first day of fall, and the 2020 Big Ten football season is just a month and 2 days away. Later today, we're expecting to get a chance to talk to Ohio State defensive coordinator Kerry Combs and at least a few Buckeye players about the start of fall camp. She'll have that to look forward to at buckeyescoop.com later today. This morning, though, I'm joined by Marc Givler. He is one of the recruiting analysts at Buckeye Scoop. He just dropped a really interesting run through on where Ohio State stands with a number of five-star prospects in both the 2021 and 2022 classes. Marc, let's start with 2022 and Luther Burden. He's a wide receiver from Missouri. What is the latest with him?
Yeah, right now he dropped the top five. Ohio State and Oklahoma are probably the top two right now. And according to his coach, a commitment could be coming here in the next couple of weeks. So could be something that gets wrapped up here maybe by the middle to end of October. Probably not good news for Ohio State if that happens. The Buckeyes were definitely probably a team to beat coming into this thing, but as we've seen with 2020, it's a strange recruiting landscape right now. There's no visits. There's very little communication going on until September 1st when things were able to open up and coaches could contact these guys. And at some point here in probably the last month or two, Oklahoma's made a good push for Burden. And that is probably the safe pick if he goes through with something here in the next few weeks. And the question is, will he go through with it? And if he does, will that be the last we hear about it? I've got a lot of people who are skeptical that anything that happens here in the next few weeks is going to be super permanent. So I think there's still going to be some room left for Ohio State. If it's Oklahoma, I think Ohio State's still going to have their say in this before it's all said and done.
Well, I mean, you mentioned all the uncertainty right now. The biggest uncertainty right now is that NCAA mandated dead period. I think people may not actually understand what exactly schools can and can't do right now. So can you explain that and how long it's been going on and what it actually means to be in a dead period for recruiting?
Yeah, I mean, the simplest way to put it, and there's a lot of red tape there with the NCAA and the fine print and the bylaws and everything else, but essentially a dead period means no in-person contact. That is the easiest, most simple way to explain it to people. Coaches cannot go on the road and visit prospects. Prospects cannot visit campuses and interact with coaches. Now they can drive through the campus and walk around the campus on their own, but they're not allowed to have any on-campus interaction with coaches, support staff, etc. So there has been basically no face-to-face interaction other than some Zoom calls between prospects and coaches since mid-March. It was like March, 12th or something like that. I mean, it was I don't have the exact date, but it was back middle early March, and that has now been extended through January 1st of 2021, which looks like no official visits for the class of 2021, basically. So that's going to be a thing they're going to have to navigate. And it's going to create there's going to be certain kids where that's a good thing. That might be a good thing for Ohio State. And there's going to be certain kids where that's going to create, a lot of challenges. So that's where we stand now. Will they extend that further? I'm personally hopeful they can maybe try and do something in January, February and push signing day back. But I haven't heard that's the case. I know a lot of college coaches think they're just not going to have visits this cycle.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot up in the air and a lot of moving parts with all of that. If it all stays as it is right now, there would be zero official visits before the early signing period, which is turned into basically the de facto actual signing day, that virtually everyone signs in December most years, now that they've made that change. What is that going to mean for the class of 21 players if at least, I mean, minimally January 1st is the next time you could possibly have some sort of an on-campus or in-person kind of visit? I mean, with guys having no official visits at all, how many of them are looking at maybe signing with a school they've never seen in person? Is this something that's going to maybe shift that early signing day back to, everyone sort of signs in February now? Like, what do you think the impact is going to be for that class of 2021?
Yeah, I have not heard anything about pushing it back. I think that'd be the sensible thing to do. I think the sensible thing would be to just push it all back into February and maybe even push it into late February, beginning of March, and maybe give these guys January, February to try and make some visits. But I haven't heard that that's going to be the case. And I don't think college coaches are particularly confident that's going to happen. So that's kind of a wait and see thing. And until the NCAA addresses that, I just think you're going to see a lot of kids continuing to lock in their spots and just go without visits. The good news for 2021 is a lot of these guys saw the school they committed to at some point early. They were able to get in on an unofficial visit, but there are some kids who are going to have to maybe consider committing to a school they've never visited to, and that's that's always a wild card. And I know Ohio State's in on a big one there with JT Tuimoloau, and that's going to be a guy that they don't get a visit from unless they change this in January. So he may try to commit to Ohio State without visiting.
Yeah, I mean he is one of the other 5-star players you wrote about on Monday at Buckeye Scoop. You could find Marc's complete column there with several other 5-star names that big names to know and kind of where the Buckeyes stand with all those. Buckeye Scoop members can find that at buckeyescoop.com. As for 2022, I mean this is you mentioned guys kind of locking in their spots for 2021 and just with the uncertainty like just lock in a spot for the 2022 guys. If there is still the hope of spring visits next year, do you see guys just sort of pushing back their visits and their decisions? Is this something that's going to slide that 2022 cycle back from where it normally would be? Or is this going to kind of play out? Or what are you sort of hearing from guys? Are they looking at maybe doing that same thing the 2021s are doing right now? Lock in that spot, have, sort of have that any port in a storm kind of thing right now. And then if and when visits open up, again, that maybe they may sort of reopen things after that. Like what does that look like for the 2022s?
I mean, I think a lot of kids are going to make some snap decisions here the next 3 or 4 months. That's what I think. I think we've already started seeing it. I just don't think there's any confidence in terms of the NCAA in getting back to visits. They've seen this dead period extended like 4 times now, and I just think that's created a thought process that, well, when are we ever going to visit? So I think you're going to see kids lock in spots, and I am confident that the gates are going to open here at some point during the 2022 cycle. Whether that's in March or April, or whether that's maybe all the way to next fall, I don't know. But I do think at some point during the 2022 cycle, the gates are going to open back up, and that I think is when we see the chaos of all these guys who are going to be committing early. And they never had visits before. Some of these kids have never taken a visit like anywhere. Some of these guys, if they didn't get out super early in their process, they have not really seen any of these schools. And when you open the gate and now, hey guys, you can visit, I think you're going to see a lot of craziness when that happens. So to that extent, I don't think college coaches are taking the 2022 commitments as seriously as they normally would. I think any year you're going to be a little skeptical on the early commitments, but I think this year in particular, college coaches are like, this one's not over. We'll talk to them, we'll spend the next 12, 18 months talking to them. Eventually you'll get to visit. And so I think you're going to see a lot of schools going along with this, but I don't think any of these schools are going to be too beholden to what happens here the next 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, there's that old idea that if you have an early commitment from a kid, that just means you're in his top 3. Like this year, maybe that means you're in his top 5 or top 7. And it's also going to be interesting to see what happens with the 2021s. If they really are signing with places they potentially have never visited, what does that look like in terms of the transfer portal 6, 12, 18 months out from when they sign? If things are not what they may have expected when they put their name on that dotted line, that's going to be really interesting to follow. And I mean, can you imagine craziness in recruiting getting even crazier? I mean, just when you thought it couldn't get any better. Before we let you go, Marc, let's talk a little gambling. You co-host the Vegas Nose podcast with Bill Green. Boy, that's never a tough sell, is it?
Gosh, people are going to start thinking I have a gambling problem or something. That's all I'm talking about here the last couple of weeks.
Yes, well, you do co-host the Vegas Nose podcast with Bill Green. You can find that in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, any other spots that you find where great podcasts are sold. Monday, sportsbetting.ag dropped a win total over/under for Big Ten schools. Just let's do a little housekeeping note on this. This is a little bit weird. Normally, you see those preseason over/under numbers, and they are regular season only. So when it says that Ohio State's over 10.5 during a normal year, that's just for the 12 regular season games. Not the Big Ten championship game, not the bowl games, not the college football playoff. This year, it's a little different. for the Big Ten teams, the way they have it laid out is it is for the regular season plus that plus 1 week, the Champions Week, the Big Ten Championship game, whatever you want to call it, that week when every Big Ten team is going to be playing sort of its opposite number from the other division. So the over-under for Ohio State during an 8-game regular season is 8.5. So they need, if you're going to cash that one on the over, you need Ohio State to win all of its regular season games plus that Big Ten championship game. So, Mark, I'm going to run down this list of over-unders for each of the 14 Big Ten teams. You can tell me which of these jump out to you as potentially interesting numbers. Ohio State, 8.5. Penn State, 7.5. Wisconsin, 7. Michigan and Minnesota, 6.5. Indiana, 5.5. Iowa and Nebraska, 5. Northwestern, 4. Michigan State and Purdue, 3.5. Maryland, 2.5, and Rutgers, 1.5. So, Mark, which of those kind of jumps out to you as kind of an intriguing opportunity?
Are we operating under the premise that we actually get 9 games in for everyone? Because the notion of taking any over right now kind of scares the life out of me. You're talking, because the Big Ten did such a bang up job here with getting this thing rolling, there's no flexibility in the schedule anymore. So anything that derails, any type of postponement, there's really not going to be any postponements. I don't think. It sounds like if something, gets canceled, if something happens, it's going to be canceled, and then you're going to be on the bad side of an over bet. So just let me put the caveat in there that I'm going to do this under the assumption that everybody gets 9 games in. Is that fair?
Sure. And I do wonder if there are games canceled, if this is going to be like when a football game gets shortened by a thunderstorm, if they only play 7 games, will they just kind of negate all of the over bets on that team?
Right.
That's
you would hope
you
would hope something like that would be in place. But yeah, just for the premise of this discussion, let's just assume everyone gets 9 in. Gosh, I like Penn State over. Do I think they're going to beat Ohio State? No. Are they the most likely team to beat Ohio State on that schedule? Yes. If they win that, that's clear sailing. They're gonna win. They're gonna win 8 or 9 if they beat Ohio State. If they lose to Ohio State, well, what says they can't beat the other 8 teams on their schedule? They're gonna be favored in all those games. So I kind of like the Penn State over there. I think there's some decent value there. I'm going under on Michigan. I think there's 3-4 better teams in the league this year. I don't think they're going to get a particularly good matchup in the Champions Week. I don't think they're going to beat Ohio State or Penn State. I would go under on Michigan. I think that's one that kind of jumps out to me. The other one, gosh, can Maryland win 3 games this year? They don't. There's no Furman on there. There's no Citadel on there. Are we sure they're even? I'm not sure they're beating Rutgers. I think they're probably going to beat Rutgers, but I'm not sure of that. Once you get past that, I kind of think 1-8, 2-7 sounds about right for Maryland. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I have one that I'm going to strongly agree with you on, and one that I'm going to disagree with you on. Michigan, I'm going under on like half the East here. Michigan, I think Michigan at 6.5 just seems crazy to me because they have to go 7-2 to beat that number. So okay, let's just assume they probably are not going to win in Columbus, right? They're going to be a substantial underdog in Columbus. That's not a team Ohio State's going to overlook. So you probably pencil in a loss there. Okay, so now they need to go 7-1 the rest of their games. Of the top 4 teams in the league who on those win totals, Penn State, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Indiana, guess how many of those Michigan has to play? All 4. Guess how many of those
all
Michigan's
of them,
going to beat? Probably not all of them. So you figure a loss to Ohio State. They're home against Wisconsin and Penn State. Okay, maybe they get both of them. I still think Penn State probably beats them in Ann Arbor. Then they have to go to Minnesota. They're a 3-point underdog week 1 at Minnesota. Indiana's going to get someone this year. They're at Indiana. I don't know if Indiana gets Michigan. I don't know if Indiana gets Penn State. I don't know if Indiana gets Ohio State. Indiana's going to get someone this year. Someone's going to get got in Bloomington this year. So I just don't. And then even if they go through and win all of those games or lose just one of those games, then they have to win their Champions Week game against presumably Minnesota or Wisconsin if they're, the number 2 team in the East. That is asking a lot. I don't see that happening. So yeah, Michigan under I think is a good one. I'm going Penn State under. You can only lose one game, so I mean they're going to be an underdog at home against Ohio State, so you can't pencil them in for that. So then if that happens, they need to run the table at Indiana, at Nebraska, home for Iowa, at Michigan, and then again probably if they do run that table and they're 7-1, they got to beat Minnesota or Wisconsin. I mean again, it's possible. I think that the Michigan bet is the Michigan under is the most obvious bet to me on here. But yeah, that Penn State, like that's asking a lot with as much uncertainty as there is this year. They basically have to beat Ohio State in order to cash that, because I think I don't think you can pick anyone.
I think there's I think Ohio State clearly is if we divide this into tiers based on talent, Ohio State's on its own tier. I think Penn State's on its own tier as a second tier in the Big Ten. And then I think the next tier is where you start talking about, Michigan and Wisconsin and some of the other schools. I think Penn State is clearly the second most talented team in the league, even without Micah Parsons, which I don't think he's coming back. I know there's been some discussion about that from James Franklin. It doesn't sound like that's going to happen. But, I mean, if he does, it would certainly turbocharge them. But I think they're going to out-talent everybody. I just do. I think they're going to out-talent everybody else on their schedule. And if they lose to Ohio State, they lose to Ohio State. They can get in there at 8-1. I'm such a buyer in their talent. I'm not necessarily a buyer in James Franklin out coaching Ryan Day in the fourth quarter, but I'm a buyer that they're going to put a more talented product on the field than everyone else in the league other than Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, I would 100% agree with you on the talent level there. This just seems like a year when there's going to be such a narrow margin for error on everything. If a quarterback tests positive for COVID and is missing 3 weeks, there are points in those schedules where that can cost you a couple losses right there. So
you're on like a no overs policy, which I think is fair. But I'm trying to. My premise is that they all play 9, and you don't have these huge disruptions. But no doubt, if you're concerned about disruptions and weird stuff, the overs are scary.
I'm betting the over on weird stuff this year. I will do that very confidently. The other one that was kind of interesting to me is Michigan State. Only 3.5, which, you think Michigan State, this is Michigan State. They're very good. This year.
I would take the under on that. I don't think they're very good at all. I think they're a mess.
Yeah, they're a mess. They had no spring ball. They've had little to no summer. This is a first year. They have not a great schedule. I mean, they open with Rutgers at home. That should be the surest win of anything on their schedule is week 1, Rutgers at home. Okay, so there's one. All right. The only other games on that regular season schedule that I look at and go, they get like a 50-ish% chance in those. At Maryland, November 21st, Northwestern at home, November 28th. Other than that, like there's nothing good there. I mean, there's home for Indiana, maybe Indiana has an Indiana week. Otherwise, they have to beat Michigan. They have to beat Penn State. They have to beat Ohio State. Like none of those are going to happen. They did not get a great draw cross division. And then you're probably looking at like a Purdue or Northwestern in Champions Week to try and get another one there. So if they beat Rutgers and Maryland and Northwestern at home, and then they beat maybe Purdue Champions Week, that's what it would take to hit the over there. Or you win at against Indiana, at Iowa. There's just. That is not a schedule that looks real good for Michigan State.
Part of Rutgers, if you want to call it weakness or problem, is also a strength in that, man, they worked the portal. They got a lot of guys, and I'm not sure that all of those guys are going to be immediately eligible, but they got a lot of guys that have played college football, have been through this. Now, they didn't have the practice time he would like to kind of form that into a cohesive unit. But I'm not so sure that Rutgers is just a layup for the Marylands and Michigan States and Illinois, Purdue's of the world. I'm not so sure Rutgers doesn't get one or two of those teams this year.
Yeah, that seems Rutgers 1.5. I looked at Rutgers 1.5 much longer than I felt comfortable doing, and that ended up as a look. Do I want to be the idiot who's over on Rutgers? No, I do not. I do not want to spend my fall being the guy who's over on Rutgers. So,
right.
But yeah, I think
but there's the under is like, I don't know. I mean, that's not a juicy under to me. I mean, they could beat Maryland and Michigan State. I mean, that would not be.
Yeah, you catch one team during the regular season, and then you get Illinois during Champions Week, and like, okay, sure, ta-da, there's 2 wins, you get your over. So
right, yeah.
Well, that some interesting numbers there, and maybe you and I can come up with something, some stakes for that Penn State game. Maybe something new from the Buckeye Scoop merchandise store. This new Buckeye Scoop swag. Marc, thank you for joining us this morning. And yes, there is. You may have been admiring, if you're watching on YouTube, admiring my spiffy new Buckeye Scoop hat. That is one of the items for sale right now in our merchandise store. You can find the link to that on the Buckeye Scoop Twitter account. I tweeted out a link last night. A bunch of really cool, nice fall gear in that store. You can place an order this week to be one of the first people with the new gear. I will be probably doing that again. I saw some nice hoodies in there. Might be placing an order for one of those pretty much as soon as we stop recording. So make sure you check that out. Also, with the season right around the corner, if you're thinking this might be a good time to join Buckeye Scoop, you are correct. This is we are already headed into the ramp up to the season. Tony Gerderman and I will be on the call with Kerry Combs and some of the Buckeye players later today. We'll have full coverage of that later. And then we got our media schedule for the fall. We're going to have multiple media availabilities every week leading up to the season. And hey, that season only about a month away. So if you are interested in all of the great insider content and analysis at BuckeyeScoop.com, just go to the website, BuckeyeScoop.com, and you can sign up for a membership right there. And lots of really fun, interesting conversations on our Ask the Insiders board the last couple of weeks. And it is only getting busier and more entertaining as we start that ramp up to the season. So if you also can leave us a 5-star rating and review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to, we would greatly appreciate that. You can find this and all of our great shows just by searching Buckeye Scoop on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud. You can subscribe right there to get all of those shows right to your phone every time they drop. That Vegas Knows podcast that Marc and Bill do, that is a very entertaining listen every week. That is highly recommended, as well as the Gives in the Bank podcast that he does with Bill. That is a recruiting podcast. There has been an awful lot to talk about in the recruiting world recently, so that's worth a listen and a subscription as well. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.